In this video, we're just going to have a very quick look at the interface for SketchUp. We're not going to talk through the tools themselves and how to use them. We're just going to quickly point out some of the major features that you might need to know so that you can then follow on in some future videos that will teach you how to use them. So when we have logged into SketchUp, we should end up at the home page here. Being a web application, when you generally save something, it is saved to the cloud, in this case the Microsoft OneDrive, because we're logging in via Microsoft Login. However, you can save to your computer as well, which I'll show you shortly. When you are on the home screen, you can start modeling just by pressing this Start Model in the center, but I tend to use the Create New up the top left a little bit, mainly because it gives me the millimeters template. Being that we are in Australia and we don't use feet and inches, I tend to model most things in millimeters, unless I'm going to model something very large, like maybe a house or bigger, where I might like to use meters because it's a bit easier. But most things that I model are smaller, and therefore millimeters is a good template to start with. When it does load, you'll get this interface here. The person in the center here might look a little bit different, but you generally get somebody, and that person is just a model in SketchUp themselves, and it's designed to give you a little bit of perspective as to size. It's very easy when you start modeling to not know how big something is, and if you were designing for a real purpose such as 3D printing or a plan for something, having scale is very important, and we will talk about that in a future video. But for now, I'm going to click on him, and I'm actually going to press delete to remove him. Okay, starting with the top left-hand corner, we have what is essentially our file menu. So if we click on these three lines, we get a menu very much like a file menu in Word or something else, where we can create new things, open up existing projects and so forth. Again, if we save, we'll be saving to the cloud, to the OneDrive system, but you can export or download a file to have it actually on your computer, and this is important for when you need to submit work here at school, because we will need to submit an actual file and not just a link to something. Also, when you do save, you get the opportunity to give a name. So this untitled is referring to what my product is saved as. Because I haven't officially saved this yet, it still says untitled. Over on the right hand side, we'll just point out that there are some menu options here. Probably the most important one to begin with is the actual second one here, which is called the instructor. And if I click on that, it opens out an instructor that basically explains the tool that I'm currently using. I have the selection tool chosen, and it's basically giving me a very quick example up the top and some ideas about how I can use that tool, including some special keys that might be useful for me to change the way it works. So the instructor is a great place to look when you're not sure about a new tool or a new feature. If you're able to leave it open, it is very useful, but often on a smaller screen, you might need to get rid of it for some extra storage or some extra space. So you do that by clicking this little arrow up in the top right, and it will just hide that panel. In fact, each of these different options down the right hand side open in that same panel, and you can just scroll through them. So some of the others that might be useful to you early on will be the ones to do with materials, where you can choose colors and so forth for the things that you're making. So it's essentially like painting your models that you make. You also might be using the view a little bit, so you can hide and show different objects that you make, and that can be really useful when you're trying to do a little bit more delicate work. You probably will also do some grouping, so being able to use things like the components might be something that you use as you start designing things a little bit more complex. The other ones you can explore or will look at as they become useful. Over on the left-hand side, we have our main drawing tools and tools for manipulating what we design. So we've already mentioned the selection tool up the very top here. Then we have a rubber as our second tool to remove things from our model. We then get down to this third tool, and we'll notice that it has a little arrow on it. So this indicates that when I click on this particular tool, it's going to give me some additional options. So this tool lets me choose a paint bucket and a sampling eyedropper. So a bucket for painting those material colors and an eyedropper for selecting an existing color or material. We then have a drawing tool, so we can have a straight line or a freehand line. We have an arc tool for different curves and shapes. We then have a rectangular tool, which lets us do rectangles, circles, and other sorts of polygon shapes. It also has a 3D text option. And these first tools are very, very similar to tools you may have seen in any sort of drawing program. So you might be kind of familiar with some of these. So if we were to, for example, take this rectangular tool, we could draw a rectangle on our screen, and it's kind of similar to what you might have seen in another drawing program. The next tools, however, give us the 3D aspects. So the next tool is probably one of the most important that you'll use. It's called the push-pull tool. Now it also has some options, the push-pull, the follow me, and the offset tool. And it's these that certainly allow us to create three-dimensional shapes. So if I take my push-pull tool, for example, to this shape, I can click and drag to create a three-dimensional shape. And that is essentially how we design in SketchUp. We create 2D shapes, and then we push and pull them to create 3D. It's very much like sculpting with clay. You can add or subtract from an existing shape. So I could very easily draw another shape in this corner maybe, and then using that shape, I could then push out a section, essentially removing part of this shape. And once I've got that shape, I might decide to bring this shape out here instead. And we can keep going, adding and subtracting from an existing shape until we are satisfied with what we need. So here I have a circle, and if I push and pull that out, I can bring it all the way out the other side, or I might in fact bring it so it's level and create a hole that I can see through. So very simple shapes that you're familiar with become very powerful as we push and pull them out. Underneath that, we have another tool called Outer Shell, and that's useful as you get a little bit more complex, but probably won't be used very often. Then we get down to movement tools, so we can take these and take objects to move them. That looked a little bit like push-pull actually. Let's just select a whole section, and we could use this to move it in 3D space. We have a measurement set of tools, so we can take and set measurements. We can show dimensions. This one here, in fact, is very useful when you start drawing plans for maybe woodwork, because you can draw your model and know what the measurement should be. We have some tools for moving around our shape, and we also have these orbiting and adjusting tools. This is what we would use to rotate around, to zoom in and out, etc. Now, while we're talking about these tools, it just brings up another important point. While you certainly can use these tools to move around the space and how you look at things, I strongly encourage you to get yourself a mouse if you don't already have one, especially one that has a wheel on it, because that wheel, that center wheel, can be used to roll in and out. So basically your zoom can be rolling in and out on the wheel, and if you click and hold down your center wheel, you get your pan and rotate. And it's a lot easier to pan and rotate, zoom in and out, and even to draw shapes with a mouse than it is to use the touchpad on your computer. So again, they don't have to be expensive, fancy mice, but an actual mouse that you can use with a center wheel does make working SketchUp a lot easier. So that is the main tools and layout of the interface that you're going to use. As I said, we're not going through in any sort of detail in this video about how to design and use them. It was really just a bit of a look around to see where things are. As we use each new tool, we'll explain them in more detail, so make sure you follow through with future videos.